You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything. Conversations with the icons of our time.
Being on a soap opera for 6.5 years, I became a kind of iconic figure for people with diabetes in their families, and they would call me, leave messages, they would write me. I'm sure back then if we had email, I'd have had hundreds of emails.
Singer, actress Gloria Loring. Today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Gloria Loring started singing professionally in 1960. She was a teenager. Then, after several years of modest success as a singer, in 1980 she joined the cast of NBC's Days of Our Lives as the character Liz Chandler.
It was a horrible accident. They were fighting and things got knocked over, and one of them was an anvil. It fell on Carlos' chest.
Oh my God, it must have been bad.
Yes, it was. It is. Neil said that Carlos got a collapsed lung.
That was a role she continued in for the next 6 years. But if you don't remember her for Days of Our Lives, perhaps you remember this song?
You take a good, you take a bad, you take them all, and there you have the facts of life, the facts of life.
It was a song that Gloria Loring and her husband, Alan Thicke, wrote, and which she sang. They also wrote the theme song for Different Strokes.
Got different strokes it takes, different strokes it takes, different strokes to move the world.
About that same time, though, Gloria Loring was stunned to find out that her 4-year-old son, Brennan, had type 1 diabetes. She immediately devoted herself to finding out all she could about how to treat and, more importantly, how to prevent diabetes. November is Diabetes Awareness Month. So today on Now I've Heard Everything, we'll revisit my 2006 conversation with Gloria Loring about her book called Living with Type 2 Diabetes, a guide for those with the disease and for those close to them. In a moment, our conversation.
Over a 30-year span, national radio personality Bill Thompson did over 10,000 interviews with people who had a hand in shaping our culture and our society. Here is one of those interviews. Enjoy.
So here now from 2006, Gloria Loring.
I've been involved with the world of diabetes since my son was diagnosed when he was 4 years old, and that's 27 years now.
Would I be correct in guessing that 27 years ago, you figured if you just put enough effort into this, we could at least control it, begin to eradicate it, the numbers would go down over the years? It must be greatly disappointing and alarming to you that the numbers are going up after all these years.
Yeah, I think it's very alarming to everyone in the healthcare industry area, because this portends real disaster for our healthcare system. The complications of diabetes are blindness, gangrene, kidney failure, heart disease, stroke, etc. And they greatly increase your chances of all of those. Diabetes is the leading cause of new blindness. I think the leading cause of dialysis and kidney failure. So it's, and so many of the people, 90% of the people who have diabetes have type 2, which is much more controllable if you keep yourself close to normal weight, exercise frequently, just use the body the way it was intended to be used. Have some respect for the instrument. This body we've been given is so extraordinary, and it really, it can have, the creme brulee once a week, and it can have, occasionally a little too much wine, and it's fairly forgiving. It has a system to deal with, some of the toxicities that we tend to put into our system. But when you just consistently over a long period of time abuse the system, it's going to break down. And that's what diabetes is. It's a breakdown in the metabolic system. With type 1 diabetes, you take insulin injections because the beta cells have been destroyed and don't produce insulin. But in type 2, there's a kind of wearing down process, or the body isn't using the insulin efficiently. And a lot of times, Dr. Pritikin showed that a lower fat diet, very healthy, lots of fruits and vegetables, some good exercise, and the body says, okay, now I can get back to normal. So that's what this book is trying to do, is help people in a very accessible way, because I'm the kind of person who likes to illustrate points with stories. And so hopefully this will be helpful to people.
Donna, do you have diabetes yourself?
No, I don't. Just my son.
So your experience is through him.
Through him, but also, you see, I became, being on a soap opera for 6.5 years, I became a kind of iconic figure for people with diabetes in their families because they knew about Brennan. And they would call me, leave messages, they would write me. I'm sure back then if we had email, I'd have had hundreds of emails. And that's why I started writing, because I couldn't answer their letters to the full extent I would have wished to. So as the time went on, I was complaining to a friend, and she said, you know, you should just write a book. Why don't you write all this great information in one book instead of writing 50 letters? And I said, that makes a lot of sense. So that's how that started. And then also for the last 7 years, 8 years almost now, I have written a column, a monthly column for the Diabetes Research and Wellness Foundation, interviewing both experts and people who have diabetes, getting them to tell their stories. So I had all of those stories to draw on for the book, too.
And did I read somewhere that it's maybe in your book, that 5 million Americans may have type 2 diabetes and not know it?
Yes. It often goes unrecognized for a long period of time. And sometimes the way people start to recognize it is they start to actually have the damage from it. Blurry, their eyes get blurry and they're starting to have problems with their eyes, or they wind up losing a toe or a few toes, because they didn't know that all this time they didn't feel quite right. Men are the worst offenders, because I think they have such pressure on them to be macho and, no, I'm cool. I got a little pain in my foot or whatever. And they keep going. Women also sometimes don't tell about symptoms because they're in serving people. They have their families or whatever.
But I'm guessing also there's a fair number of people say, all right, I'm 50 now. My eyes are going to get a little blurry from time to time. It happens.
I'm not feeling well. Well, there are lots of reasons for that. And they don't know the symptoms to watch for diabetes, etc.
You've known me for all of about 8 minutes now, but judging by what you've seen, I'm probably at high risk, aren't I?
You could be high risk, or you could be moderately increased risk, yes.
Because I'm obese. I've got an inactive lifestyle.
Yes.
I don't always eat the right things.
Right.
You know, and now, what can I do to find out if I might be either at risk for type 2 or might already have type 2 diabetes?
Well, what you could do is you could regularly and talk to your doctor about this, or your pharmacist can help you too. There are little test strips, and you can actually test your urine to see if you're spilling sugar. If sugar is spilling out into your urine, it means you don't have sufficient insulin in your body. And if you don't have sufficient insulin, that means your blood sugar levels are higher than normal. And it's the extra sugar circulating in the blood that causes the damage to the small blood vessels, the capillaries in the eyes, the nerve damage to the feet, the nerve damage to the kidneys. So for you, start to think about what you could do. If there's one thing you could change, could you 3 times a week take a 30-minute walk? It's maybe even while you're on your cell phone, or or a friend you haven't talked to. Hey, come on, let's go for a walk. Or your wife, or your kid, or have a reason to get out there and do something. Take a bike ride on a Sunday, and then try to do that a few more times during the week. Just start. Just make an effort.
Well, it strikes me there's a lot of people who are confused with the type 1, type 2 distinction, and they think, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about I have diabetes because I don't have to take that shot every day. There's no way I could do that. Yeah,
they do. I have a friend recently who sent me an email, and her doctor, she's had diabetes for 15 years, and she's an acquaintance, and her doctor now wants to put her on insulin injections. She said, I'll do anything but that, anything. And she said, isn't there some kind of pill or something I can take? And I said, no, honey. If your doctor thinks you need insulin, you need to take that. By the way, now, what are your hemoglobin A1C levels? And she said, what's that? And I said, excuse me, you've had diabetes for 15 years and your doctor doesn't tell you about the A1C and what it should be? That's the standard of care right now, is knowing what your A1C level is. So she's not, for 15 years, been getting that standard of care. And she said, I guess I better get your book. And there is a lot of fear. But Dr. Tim tells a story that I recount in the book about Kathy, who came to him, and she was 72 years old, and she was a type 2 diabetic, and she now had to start insulin injections. And she said, well, you can't make me take them. And he said, you're absolutely right, Kathy. I can't make you take them. But let me just show you something. And he loaded up an insulin with saline solution, and he gave himself a shot, and with a tiny, tiny little needle, and she said, well, you didn't even wince. And he said, yeah, I'm just going to give you a quick little poke and you just get a sense of the saline. And she said, well, I hardly felt that at all. She said, well, maybe I could do this. So sometimes, and the reason that part of the title of this book is Moving Past the Fear, is we gather images for ourselves of things we absolutely can and won't do. And then suddenly we get there and we say, wait a minute, do I want to retain my eyesight? Do I want to not be on dialysis? Do I want to have my legs to walk around and play with my children or grandchildren, or, be able to go out and do what I want? How limited do I want my life to be? Compared to those kinds of limitations, a couple of injections a day of insulin don't seem like a lot of fuss.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe a lot of us have it confused with those nasty old tetanus shots we used to get.
Yeah,
those are bad.
Oh, the needles they use for insulin injections are the thinnest, tiniest little things. And they really, they don't hurt. I mean, there's it's like a little poke. It's like a little poke with your fingernail. You poke yourself, and it's like, oh, and it's over. And I've done it. And I, gave my son the injections. He was afraid of them back when he was little, and it was hard at times. But, you do what you have to do.
I know the other thing that freaks a lot of people out is having to keep poking their finger all day to test their blood levels. That's got to be, even if it is just a tiny little poke just for a second, to do it several times a day has got to wear you down after a while.
Well, a pianist that I talked to was very concerned about that, and he went to his doctor and he said, look, I have to play the piano. I need the pads on my fingertips. And the doctor said, use the same place all the time and do it on the side of the top of the finger, the side, not the pad. And you'll build up a little bit of a callus there from the frequent blood testing. You'll still get the little tiny drop of blood you need. You hardly need to poke it at all. And yet what happens is it becomes a little used to that poking, and it builds up that callus, a little more spot that sort of protects it. So there are methods, and they're in the book, for people who say, oh, I'm afraid of this or I'm afraid of that. There are suggestions in the book. And I think the best suggestion always is, first of all, to have a great doctor who really knows about diabetes, to read everything you can, get a good book like this, get it in front of you, and study it. And the third thing is get a diabetes mentor. Somebody else who has diabetes, who's a few years ahead of you, who's taking good care of themselves. And, it's really, really helpful. I remember when my son was little and, I was so confused and so overwhelmed by all the information and all the things I felt I had to do, and having another mother that I could call and say, I don't know, he wants a snack and I did this and I don't know what. She's, oh, just give him this. It's fine. Don't worry, you're fine. Just somebody to say, I'll tell you when it's serious, because I've been doing this for 5 or 10 years.
Well, coming back to something you said a moment ago about wanting to be around for our children and grandchildren, part of the responsibility of having children and grandchildren is making sure that they stay healthy enough that they don't have to worry about getting diabetes at some point.
There's a new show. I just saw a little bit of it on TV called Honey, You're Killing the Kids.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
And it's about the terrible habits and the fast food and the junk that parents are allowing their children to eat. I actually know one woman who has never cooked a meal for her child. She says, but she's very good at eating in restaurants. The food in restaurants has extra fat and sugar and salt that is not necessary. And so her daughter has grown up with this kind of food now as her palate is accustomed to that.
It's her baseline.
It's the baseline. And, it's not good. It's just not good.
But it's got to be encouraging to you that schools are now rethinking their decision to put Coke machines in the cafeterias and replacing them with fresh fruit or bottled water. That has to be encouraging.
That is encouraging. However, and at the same time, if at home they're eating a bunch of junk, when they get to school and there's the fresh fruit, they'll throw it out. So, it really starts in the home with the parents. So the more parents we can reach and re-educate, re-inspire them to do what they can. It's a tough one. People are so busy, but there are some things that are really important, and our children's health is very, very important.
Now, is Brennan a parent?
Not yet. He's going to be married next year
Wow.
to Kathleen, and she's a lovely lady, and she's been taking good care of him too, so that's good.
But what a great role model you've been to him now when he eventually becomes a parent himself. I mean, the model of responsibility.
I hope so. I hope so.
What does he think of the book?
He hasn't seen it. We just got copies in before I flew here,
wow.
so I'll have to show him the book and have him take a look at it.
I mean, he knew you
get
were
his
doing
view.
it, of course.
Oh yeah. Well, he's not a main feature in this book. He has been more of a feature in my book, Parenting a Child with Diabetes. This one, I talk about some of my friends who've had diabetes for a long time, who do take insulin injections and have had type 1, but the same basic elements, aspects of personality and character are demanded, because you've got to develop the discipline to take care of yourself. And people say, well, do I really need to blood test? And I say, I'm going to tell you what my dentist says about flossing. Only floss the teeth you want to keep. And only do your blood testing and exercise and watch your food and take appropriate medication if you want to keep your eyes, your legs, your kidneys, and, by the way, gentlemen out there, your sexual function.
That's right. Those are capillaries down there.
Yes, really. There's a fella, and I've forgotten his name. He's a comedian. He was telling me, he said, oh, yeah, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And when I was talking with the doctor, he was saying, well, I have to protect your eyes. And I was saying, yeah. And I said, your kidneys, and yeah. And he said, and it can affect your sexual function. You can get ED. And he said, I can what? Tell me what I need to do. What? I think we just got his attention.
Yep.
And also for women, by the way. I mean, obviously, for the male, it's a more obvious external, but for women also, there can be damage in those areas. So, we want to have access to all of the facilities we've been given as aspects of this body. So,
I don't want any time it interrupts my blood flow anywhere in my body. This is a bad thing.
This is a bad thing. I just want them to know that the good news is they don't have to be afraid of diabetes. It will ask some changes of them, but they can learn to do what is necessary. They can take good care of themselves. And I have friends, in addition to my son, I have a friend who's had diabetes over 41 years. I have another friend who's had it 53 years. I have another friend who's had it 60 plus years. And I also know of two young gentlemen, they're in the second childhood, who've had diabetes for 79 and 72 years. And they're brothers. And they're both still here. And they were on the planet, the one who's had it 79 years, he's in his late 80s, has had it since insulin was invented. The first year he got the experimental insulin, and he's still here. But he has been meticulous all these years. He's kept very active. He's a walker. He used to be a biker. He's a gardener. He's kept very close tabs on his food, and he has all these years of good health to show for it.
Gloria Loring will be 78 next month. She continues as a spokesperson for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. Now, you can get your copy of Living with Type 2 Diabetes by Gloria Loring by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also find my 2006 interview with Bill and Susan Hayes from Days of Our Lives.
Our faces are known because of our longevity on Days of Our Lives. Guys and girls will come up and say, I watched you when I was a little kid and I was with my mother.
Like Mommy and
And my 1988 conversation with As the World Turns veteran Eileen Fulton.
And we couldn't say pregnant. I couldn't say, now that I'm pregnant. I had to say, now that I'm carrying Bob's child. How stuffy. I would say, yeah, now that I'm pregnant. Oh, no. If you say pregnant, we'll go off the air. Off the air. If you say knocked up, we're finished.
And, of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything on Election Eve, we'll revisit my 2004 conversation with one of the most outspoken political commentators Texas has ever produced, Molly Ivins.
Politics is so dominated by this organized chorus of people on both sides saying the same thing over and over. It's mind-washing, it's propaganda, it's certainly not real political debate.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.